very much for the privilege to present some aspects of my research at this truly historical building of the Ukrainian Institute of America in the course of this special occasion of annual Shevchenko conference. It's not only that my talk follows Олесь Федорук lecture, but I shall admit that also my research to a degree follows in Olesz footsteps, because some time ago Olesz Fedoruk addressed in his publication two intertwined issues: how Kulish contributed to the shaping of Shevchenko cult in Austrian Galicia, and how Shevchenko's cult in its turn conditioned the way Kulish presented his ideas to the Ukrainian public in Galicia. And indeed, the role of Kulish in promoting Shevchenko's poetry, building his literary cult on the other side of the Russian-Austrian imperial border in the Austrian province of Galicia, was rather central one. By the end of the 1860s, it truly seemed to be a success story. Kulish played central role in at each stage of the growth of Shevchenko's popularity among Galician Ukrainians. In my talk today, I will use interchangeably both ethnic names, Ukrainians and Ruthenians, as they were used in contemporary Galician public discourse. And during, for example, the initial period, prior to the 1860s, when Shevchenko works were circulated in limited number of printed editions and manuscript copies among the narrow circle of Galician Ruthenian activists, it was Kulish who was one of the main sources of information on Shevchenko in his correspondence with key figures of Galician Ruthenian life. In 1858, Kulish for the first time visited Galicia, and by the early 1860s, he established a wide spectrum of contacts corresponding both with the professor of the university, for example, Jakub Holovatsky, and the young students of the university and theological seminary, whom he directly sent newly published Ukrainian texts. One has to add that the Ukrainian book production in this relatively short period of relative political liberalization between the deaths of Nicholas I, Russian emperor, and the Polish January uprising was really impressive. It grew about 7 times comparing to Ukrainian book production in the previous period. We have several lists of books that were sent then in the late 1850s and early 1860s to Lviv, basically mostly to Lviv, to the centers of Austrian Galicia. All were sold through the Ruthenian bookshop in Lviv, and all of them, of course, included Shevchenko's publications. Would it be 1860 Peter's book, Semerenko's so-called edition of Shevchenko's Kobzar, or 1858 Leipzig edition of Shevchenko's poetry? But normally these lists included main Kulish publications of that time, mentioned already collection of folklore Zapiski o Южной Руси, literary anthology Hata from 1860, edited by Kulish, his historical novel Chorna Rada, and grammar Grammatica from 1857. Later also many issues of new journal Osnova prominently figure in these lists. The end of neo-absolutist regime and political liberalization in the Habsburg monarchy, and also the influx of books that were never seen before, knih predtem nebačenih, as they were called, these were two factors that contributed to the emergence of a separate Ukrainian narodnitsky, national populist, one can translate it perhaps, trend in Galician public life that promoted through the next decades exclusive Ukrainian national identification in Galicia. Of course, I have to add that the term populist should be understood in contemporary meaning and is still rather different from how we use populist in nowadays political debates. In 1861, the year of Shevchenko's death, son of Markian Shashkevich, Vladimir Shashkevich, claimed that only 5 young urban intellectuals in Galicia knew Shevchenko's poetry well. But in 1 or 2 years, the situation rapidly changed and Shevchenko became widely known. So this next period, the period of the growth of public attention to Shevchenko, regular publication of his poems in Galician press and then in separate edition, basically coincided with the decade of the 1860s, which, as I mentioned, was marked by political liberalization, constitutional experiments in this Austrian province of Galicia. And in fact, some of Shevchenko's works were for the first time published in Lviv in that time, such as Відьма, Русалка, Чигирина Чигирина, Мені однаково чи буду, Плач Ярославне, Костомарову. The anti-Tsarist satirical poem Song in separate edition prepared by Xenophon Klimkovich, one of the leaders of this Ukrainian Narodovetsky movement, appeared in 1865 for the first time, and other poems as well. We also know that in 1863 the Ukrainian journal Meta in Lviv published a poem by Pavlo Chubinski, Shevchenko Ukraine, which was attributed by the state to Shevchenko's authorship. Summarizing their impact on the Galician provincial life, the editors of Ukrainian journal Vechernitsy in Lviv claimed that due to their efforts, one could see portraits now, and that is a quote from 1863, one could see portraits of Shevchenko among the portraits of local writers in every house of the Greek Catholic priests in Galicia. And, quote, he peacefully rules over them like a father among little children, end of quote. And Kulish was rather the main, perhaps the main East Ukrainian authority who shaped the Ukrainophile, the Ukrainian understanding of Shevchenko in Galicia at that time. His third letter from Kutyev, чого стоїть Шевченко як поет народу, by Shevchenko as the poet of our people, where he sketched symbolic understanding of Shevchenko as the poet who revealed the history and the future of Ukraine, was, for example, publicly read at the declamational evening on 15th May 1862 and was republished from Osnova in Lviv journal Vechernitsy mentioned already. In the following issue of Vechernitsy, also Kulish's speech at Shevchenko's funeral was published together with its full description. The biographical pattern elaborated by Kulish was then often followed by contemporary Galician Ukrainian authors. For example, in 1862, Anatol Vahnian wrote one of the first local Galician critical essays on Shevchenko's legacy. He basically followed Kulish's symbolic perception of Shevchenko's muse and almost copied some of Kulish's metaphors. Vahnian stated, for example, that Shevchenko tore up the curtain that hid a true freedom-loving Ukraine, Little Russian, as he called it. Kulish earlier wrote that Shevchenko tore up the curtain that hid Ukrainian history. Vahnian claimed that Shevchenko discovered in Ukrainian Mohyly burial mounds the true language of the people. And we know from the quotation which we have in the program, for example, that Kulish wrote that only Shevchenko received true answer from Cossack Mohyly area. So even the symbolic poetic language of Kulish was very often then imitated or copied by the local Galician authors. In general, intellectual impact of Shevchenko and Kulish on this reading public of Galician Ukrainians was overwhelming. Reading of Shevchenko created an emotional community of readers, and, as we know from memoirs, it was a formative experience for a social generation of these early Narodovci, national populists. With the massive introduction of Shevchenko's poetry in Galician public discourse in the 1860s, cultural affiliation with the new secular literature represented by Shevchenko and Kulish became more important than for national identification than traditional loyalty to the Greek Catholic Church that defined Ruthenian identity before. At the same time, Kulish was also perceived as an author, as the author of the concepts of Ukraine, as the leading intellectual leader of Ukrainian literature. In, for example, manuscript student journal Homin, we have such a kind of comical, satirical comment on the visible and rapid Ukrainization of the students of clerical seminary in 1862. Quote, we have Ukraine here now. One already grew oseledets, this Cossack-like haircut. One among us already learned all Hata by heart. Here, the reference to Kulish edited almanach. Every time he speaks, he uses concepts from Hata, end of quote. So Kulish, besides that, was involved in almost all the new public projects of Galician Ruthenians, from publishing political newspapers and journals to the translation of Bible. In addition, he was the author of a new system of phonetical orthography, Kulishevka, which by itself was an important symbolical marker. The publication in Kulishevka, unlike in traditional etymological script, immediately signified that the text represented Ukrainian national populist position. And also intellectual impact of Kulish was tremendous. His own text from the late 1850s and early 60s shaped specific Ukrainian understanding of narod, people, but also nation, and its relationship with the educated society, intelligentsia. In other words, specific Ukrainian narodnitsky or national populist creed. We know that later, in the late 1870s, it was developed into more systematically developed into communalism, Romanisky, socialism by Mikhailo Dragomanu, but also developed into another varieties of Ukrainian populism. It was genetically related to Hungarian romantic nationalism, Polish, Russian Slavophilism, party to Russian narodnichestvo, populism, but it had very strong distinctive features. A strong national component, attention to an authentic Ukrainian national cultural development. And it was shared by this younger generation of Ukrainian activists in Galicia, in Austrian Galicia as well. And then, if I continue my chronological stages, around 1869 began the third stage. The cult of Taras Shevchenko began to be institutionalized through regular commemorative practices, literary evenings, and also through school education. The later school education deserves specific attention as the period of late 1860s that followed autonomization of Galicia is rather considered as very unfortunate for Ukrainian schooling in Galicia. You know, that is the period when Polish political elites gained control over the province and systematically Polonized the educational system. However, at the same time, what remained overlooked is the fact that together with the successful Polonization of secondary education, for example, gymnasia in Galicia, Polish politicians endowed the Ukrainophile educators with the control over the content of Ruthenian textbooks, specifically over the school textbooks that consisted of selection of literary texts, so-called czytanki. So, in the next years, the czytanki, gymnasia czytanki that were published and replaced pre-existing ones represented the best examples of modern Ukrainian poetries, represented by Shevchenko, and prose represented by Kulish. And the role of Kulish actually in selection of Shevchenko poetry for these school textbooks was very important. He even visited one of editors, Alexander Barvinsky, in his village Shlyachtinci Internauty, and stayed with him for some time doing the work on this project. So, if Shevchenko and Kulish symbolized the Ukrainian movement, and Kulish personally was involved in shaping of this movement in Galicia in the 1860s, through the next decade, the 1870s, the relationship of Kulish with Galicia national populists became much more complex and problematic. And with the remaining couple of minutes, remaining part of my presentation, I would focus on these moments of disagreement, just to present the picture in a more complex way, between Kulish and the Ukrainophiles, Ukrainian national populists in Galicia, that led later to the emergence of this specific phenomenon of Ukrainskie Narodovedsky ruch, Ukrainian national populist movement in Galicia. Well, we basically know that the Ukrainian idea in Galician context became, by the end of the 19th century, in many aspects different from how the Ukrainian idea was understood in the Russian Empire. For example, stronger role of church or stronger rejection of pan-Russian cultural identification were among the clearest differences. And we could trace back the beginning of this process exactly to these early moments of Kulish interaction with the Ukrainian activists in Galicia. As these Ukrainian Galician national populists participated in electoral processes, and commented on everyday political issues, the tensions between the position of Kulish intensified. The relationship with Polish provincial leaders in Galicia, the influence of Polish Ukrainophiles, and the loyalty to the Habsburg monarchy, which at that time was structurally transformed, were the most problematic issues. Although the intellectual authority of Kulish was then rather unchallenged, his political views presented rather a problem for Galician national populists. Since December 1864, Kulish lived in Warsaw, was employed by the Russian imperial government. The famous biographer of Kulish, for example, Yuri Lutsky, once commented that Kulish was a nationalist only in the sense of fervently believing in the birth of Ukrainian culture, but he did not view the historical and political development of Ukraine as separate from that of Russia, end of quote. This opinion might be discussed and questioned, especially in light of a new analysis of Kulish historical publications by the historian Johannes Remy. Kulish in fact depicted Russians as enemies in many historical and ethnographic texts, and in his correspondence and scholarly publications from the early 1860s, he implied the possibility of independent existence of Ukraine. Yet in the political atmosphere of post-1863, that is after Polish uprising in Baluyu Circular, Kulish was rather scornful of anything that smacked of Ukrainian political activity. In this context, the alternative center of influence on Galician national populism was represented by some Polish Ukrainophile activists and also some local old Ruthenian leaders like lawyer Julian Lavrievsky and father Stepan Kachala, who argued for closer cooperation with the Poles in order to gain better status in Galicia. The split resulted in the publication in 1867 of two alternative Galician Narodovedsky periodicals, Rus and Pravda, Truth, the latter being subsidized by Kulish. For Kulish, who at that time attempted to reach a Russian-Ukrainian rapprochement, collaboration with Poles in Galicia seemed totally unacceptable. And he demanded from the editors of Pravda to break completely with the other periodical rules and to show respect for the Russian world. For example, his close associate Bilozerski in September 1867 recommended the editors of Pravda, you need to say only one thing, that Ukrainians were not involved into any of political affairs, that they stay aside from both Polish and Russian revolutionaries. This was fulfilled over the next months in one of Pravda's editorials from October 1867, which stated that Galician Ukrainophiles do not even dream about a separate state. Obviously, Kulish attempted to guide these publications, the editors of Pravda, in such a way that Pravda could be disseminated in the Russian Empire, that it could pass through the Russian censorship, and became his own organ in the Russian Empire. That's why he and Bilozerski urged editors of Pravda to disclaim any connection with the Poles in order to meet restrictions of the Russian censorship, yet these attempts were rather fruitless. Pravda was sent to the Russian Empire but was often returned by the censorship, as the contacts between Kulish, Bilozerski and Galician national populists, even when they caused the smoothing of the latest approach to Russia, aroused suspicion of Russian panslavits and were kept under the surveillance by agents of the Russian political police. The close cooperation of Kulish and Galician national populists ended in 1870. On the one hand, Kulish stopped financing Pravda. On the other hand, most of the Ukrainophile national populist leaders broke with Kulish. The latter, they were often personally annoyed with Kulish's dictatorial and supreme tone, and they became skeptical about the political role of Ukrainian intellectuals from the Russian Empire in Galicia, since, as they claimed it, the latter lacked the experience of the constitutional government. I can give here characteristic quotation and come to conclusions. We Galicians cannot go hand in hand with current Ukrainian leaders. These peoples are not from our ground. They can be conspirators, but not the political leaders in free country. They know about the politics as much as we know about the Russian knut. We have to wait until Ukrainians will have constitution and learn to be agitators instead of conspirators. Kulish in his turn had rather poor opinion about the morality of Galician Ukrainophiles, and this all seized the Ukrainophile conciliatory line towards Russian Empire, which Kulish attempted to develop earlier. Instead, most of Galician national populists turned at that moment to Lavrievsky, whom I mentioned earlier, and his pro-Polish and pro-Austrian, and accepted his pro-Polish and pro-Austrian perspective. The new Pravda was resumed in 1872. It became more favorably disposed to the idea of a compromise between the Poles and an alliance with the federalist conservative camp in the Austrian politics. This again resulted in a strong debate with East Ukrainian national activists, this time led by an intellectual leader of new progressivist generation, Mikhailo Draguman. The situation only worsened in the mid-1870s after the publication of Kulish historical pamphlet Malovna Haidamachina in Lviv in 1876. When Kulish visited Lviv for the last time in 81-82, and himself started negotiations with leading Polish politicians in the province, he was rather an isolated figure. By that time, however, Shevchenko became increasingly perceived as the central, towering figure of the Ukrainian culture, and the Ukrainian national populist trend successfully institutionalized modern Ukrainian national identification in Galicia. Thank you for your attention.